Welcome to the Steve Barkley Ponders Out Loud podcast. As instructional coaches and school leaders, you are tasked with guiding continuous teacher growth to create student success. This podcast looks to support you with strategies from experienced guests, as well as my own insights that I've gathered over the years. I'm thrilled to have you with us. Thanks for tuning in. Supporting emotional and social well-being for school staffs and students. I'm pleased to welcome Kevin Dahill-Fuchel, the Executive Director of Counselling in Schools, to our podcast. Kevin has more than 30 years of experience working with children, families, and school staff. In his current role, Kevin is committed to developing leadership models within organizations that are needed to effectively take on the complex challenges routinely faced in schools by children, families, teachers, and administrators. With a mission to promote the emotional and social growth of children so that they can thrive in school and succeed in life, Counseling in Schools provides a range of on-site services to help New York City school leaders and their staff find a better way forward. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks, Steve. It's great to be here.
I'm wondering if you'd start with just a little bit of background and current perspective on CIS and its role.
Absolutely. Well, Counseling in Schools was started in 1986 to be a companion to a mental health clinic that was offering services in public schools as a third-party billing clinic. And families would sign their children up for therapy in the school. Sometimes, though, the insurance that was being billed for that child would get interrupted for reasons that had nothing to do with the child. So Counseling in Schools was started to accept grants to sort of create a buffer for that issue that might come up. So in a way, our mission has always been around breaking down barriers to access for children to services. As time went on and various events occurred throughout New York City and the country, frankly, the grants available to support breaking down those barriers for mental health expanded, and Counseling in Schools no longer needed to simply be an ancillary to the mental health clinic. In fact, the mental health clinics were fading out in favor of more of these grant-based services, which would have no other exchange other than consent from the parents to have their children enrolled in our services. So that's really the kernel of where we started, and where we are now is finding ourselves really as entry points to social emotional well-being, as well as more sort of clearly identified mental health concerns, but finding that the entire school community is a great place and a great opportunity for the development of just really healthy habits socially and really strong and resilient emotional people. And I say people because I don't just want to focus on the children. We do focus on the children first, but there's a lot more than children in a school community, as you know, Steve. So everybody matters.
I really appreciate the term of opportunity to thrive. I think that's where our focus needs to be. So what do you see as some of the most important elements that students need to find in classrooms that build that opportunity to thrive?
There's a couple of things. I mean, and they're easy to say, they're harder to bring about, right? But I think one of the things that jumps to mind is, a really well-balanced and healthy teacher. And, for children to thrive, I think they need an adult who's leading them, who themselves is in a thrive mode, right? They're feeling good about themselves. They're expanding. They have a sense of agency over themselves and what they're doing, and really able to connect with the children. And then I would say the children really need opportunities to connect with each other. The kind of cooperative games, if you would, or collaborative experiences that a classroom can create really allows children that opportunity to sort of find who they are. Because we do a lot of finding out who we are in relation to other people. But if it's a competitive sort of win-lose dynamic, you might find out that, you you're the top of the heap, or you might find out that you're falling off the cliff all the time, and all of those things create emotional challenges. If we do it together, and I don't just mean like everybody gets a trophy idea here,
Yep.
but just the idea that, if we can collaborate and cooperate towards things, what other things what can everybody kind of learn? And then those who are good at something will naturally be in a lead, but they'll be bringing those with them that have other skills that can complement what they do. So that's to me what a thriving classroom looks like. It's a collaborative, cooperative space with a leader in that class of an adult or several adults at times who themselves are feeling really, motivated and in a space of thriving in their own lives.
So, in many ways, the statement "learning is a social activity" fits. If you don't have the social environment, the learning's not going to happen.
Absolutely. The social environment and that emotional residue that comes from that, right? Like, there's that, sort of, saying there, I think it was the Maya Angelou piece. You're not going to remember what they say, but you're going to remember how they made you feel. And I think that really, hangs with you throughout that. And the socialization part, right? We'll get to another one of the concepts that I know you'll align with, but that feeling and sense of belonging, right? So when you're connected socially, you feel you belong. When you feel you belong, like possibilities start to really awaken for you.
So, a lot of the listeners to this podcast are instructional coaches and school leaders. Uh, I wonder if you talk a little bit about how do you see those leadership people setting the tone for SEL environments in a school?
So one of the things that I think might be overlooked at times is how the relationships that the coaches or the leaders have with each other in the school. And we're back to this collective idea, right? It's going to be a theme in my responses, Steve, as we go forward here. But I think that what they model within how they're interacting within the environment is a piece of what it is that they're offering to the teachers, and how you set those relationships up amongst your cohort of teachers, if that's what you have, and how you position yourself within that is a big part of that experience of moving towards understanding what needs to happen to create those same conditions for the children in your classroom. They're not going to be exactly the same, right? It shifts and changes for the age of the child that you're working with. Clearly, a high school classroom is going to look different than a middle school or an elementary school, but the basics of the opportunities that are there to connect, the back again to this idea of being, how can we be collaborative and support and create a supportive environment within that space. And those are some of the things that I think when you're coaching, you sort of look at, where is that opportunity when there's an answer that's incorrect? What is the response that a teacher has to a child for an answer that didn't quite meet the mark of what they were looking for? Is it, no, you're wrong? Or is it, I see part of what you're thinking was there. Can someone else help, Steve, understand maybe the direction this needs to go in? And those things, may seem like I'm just parsing language, but those words will live with a child who hears something like, "Oh, my thinking was acknowledged, but I didn't have the thought that brought me to where I needed to go," versus, "Oh, I was wrong."
Many teachers are under pressure to deliver both academic and SEL outcomes. How do you see coaches and leaders helping teachers to, I guess, first of all, manage their own emotions and have resilience themselves so that their support for students is authentic?
Yeah, I mean that's a really important question, and I think, again, something that's probably easier said than done. But I do think, again, the time that you can invest in your cohort of teachers and collaboratively working together and identifying, what resilience is, right? Resilience is a muscle that I think needs to be trained. It's not something, we're sort of often saying, "Oh, that group is a resilient group," or maybe this group isn't so resilient, or we sort of talk about it at times like some innate quality that some have and some don't. But really, I think it comes into how we train ourselves towards awareness of who we are, a kind of an outlook on life. And I think I take lessons from positive psychology. What is it that I want to see more of? Where is it that I'm heading? And collectively within a classroom, what is it that we want to see more of? Where is it that we're heading, that we want to get to? And how do you sort of stay focused on that? There are little exercises that, have come into my life through other trainings that I've been to. Just at the end of the day, what are three things that I saw happen in the world that someone helped out somebody else that was positive? Did someone hold the door on the subway? Was there someone helping someone pick up something off the street? I mean, I see those things here in the city all the time, right? And you blow right past them. But if you can connect to those things that are life-giving, it helps you be in a position to also then notice those things perhaps in your classroom. What child, held the door for you when you came in? Just little things that you do on a daily basis, some journaling. So those are individual things that you can do, but you bring it out into a collective conversation when you create a cohort and have those conversations together.
You, you just really triggered something in me for that reflection because I think I knew this, but I had forgotten it, and I just reread a research piece of you use the example of holding a door. So let's stick kindness in there,
Right.
but the impact of kindness on the person who was the receiver, but
Mm-hmm.
then the research showing the provider is getting the same benefit
Mm-hmm.
from it. But
Yeah.
then the one that blew me away was an observer of it was impacted by it. So your use of that term of stopping and reflecting on where the kindness is and that I see the kindness. Um, boy, I mean, to me, that sounds like an opening for the faculty meeting. you know, every sit in a small group of three, and each teacher talk about one that you saw today. And
Yeah. That's a great I love that, Stephen. I think, it speaks to this idea or this reality, I think, that, when you're the teacher in a class or a teacher in a school or an adult in a school building, people are watching what's happening, right? They're seeing. So the kindness is seen, right? The opposite is also seen. So, which is where I think that investment in a collective wellness amongst the adults is so important so that people are, not everybody's gonna be your best friend, but that's not the point. Is how is it socialized? How are people responding to each other? Does one teacher hold the door for another? Just in that, a child will see that. And if you don't, the child will see that too, right? So those things I think are really oft overlooked just because they seem like, oh, that's just, that's maybe someone being chivalrous or someone having good manners. But it's good practice for how you act in the school building the way you want to see everyone else act, because they're watching and they're going to take it in and it's going to have an impact.
I worked in a school years back where it was a middle school, and they'd done one of those surveys where they collected input from the kids on an adult in the school that they would trust to go to with anything. And they ended up identifying a group of kids who didn't have anyone. But they also ended up identifying a group of teachers who weren't selected by anyone.
Mm,
So the next year, they rolled out a plan where they took those kids who said they didn't have anyone, and each teacher was given one or two of those students as a focus. And the task they had was to use the kid's name once a day, to make eye contact with the student once a day. But this
mm,
is the one that really blew me away. Once a week, ask the student to do something for you.
mm-hmm.
Create the opportunity that the student carried something for you or went and got something for you.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
powerful enough at the end of the year, there wasn't a single teacher who wasn't selected by a student. So just the teacher focusing on that one student. I don't know that that was the student that picked that teacher, but that consciousness on the teacher's part brought about a change.
Yeah, and I love that, Steve. I hadn't heard that, but I think that's great. And part of what I think of listening to you say that is, you know, the fact that things can change,
Yeah,
right? Like you can sort of, be someone who's so into something. Maybe you're not making eye contact, maybe you're not holding doors, you're not consciously trying to,
right.
be an isolationist or something. You're just in your thing intensely, perhaps, and whatever else is going on in your life, maybe bringing it with you. But when you get in the classroom, I'm here to teach, and so you do your job, you know. But it's one little turn of the screw, making eye contact with someone. You know, hey, could you help me with this? I mean, and that piece just really warms my heart, right? Like the fact that they're wise enough to understand that when you give the child a responsibility, it lifts them up,
Yeah.
as opposed to, oh, I need to do this for somebody in order for them to get somewhere. No, you need to give them the opportunity to be who they're going to be. And then when they are, everybody goes higher.
And without consciousness, that's not the kid who's going to come to your mind when you need something. You
Right,
know,
because
it
right, because
takes the
that child,
consciousness on your part.
that's right. And the child themselves may be just not noticing. Like, they're noticing things, but they're just shy, or they just have a
Yeah,
lot,
yeah,
maybe a self-esteem that tells them that, like, oh, well, I'm not as good as them, or
yeah.
whatever our negative self-talk might be for the child, right? So that's just a brilliant lesson to take.
So I'd like to talk a little bit more about SEL and it being embedded in the school. So are there some shifts that you'd like to see schools making so that SEL isn't an add-on? It's not a time where we stop what else we're doing and teach SEL, but it's a foundation for building how adults and students interact.
Yeah. Um, this can be a real soapbox for me, so I'll try to keep
Go
it,
for it.
I'll
Go
try to
for it.
keep it within range here. But I think the idea from my perspective is that I'd love to see schools measure emotional well-being, social skill development on the same type of scaling that we measure our development of intellectual skills or knowledge attainment through the academic portion of schooling. So if that were the case, and actually when I think about it, if you think about it, at least here, where I went to school and in kindergarten, your report card as a kindergartner is how well do you get along with the other kids, right? Are you happy when you get to school? And can you make the letter A look like the letter A with the crayon, right? So it's like those three lanes are really understood when you're 5 and 6 years old. You get to be 7, and now it's like, okay, we're done with that. Let's now get down to this, winning lose scenario of you either pass or fail and all of that. And so I'd like to see that back reintegrated, right? Why wouldn't we want to have a teacher say, how well is this child socializing? And what do we need to do if there's an issue there? And how is this child feeling throughout the day? What do we notice about that? Or how can a child express themselves? What opportunities are they taking to express their emotions? And what emotions are they expressing? And then, do they understand the Pythagorean theorem? All of those things can exist on the same plane. And I think we can work that out so that teachers have that as part of what they're doing. You may have some specialty classes, just like you do for any of the academics, right?
Sure.
There are AP this, and there's other, advanced classes in that. So you might have some children or things that excel in those areas, or you want to dive deeper. But overall, I think it's a significant mistake for us to leave that stuff behind when a child hits 6 or 7, because there are so many more experiences that we're going to have from, 7 to 21 that are going to change how we socialize or how feel about ourselves or feel about the world. That we really ought to be continuing to monitor that and supporting it all the way through.
So I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you think you can rename the three things that you said the kindergarten report card was made up of?
Absolutely. So social skill development, emotional well-being, and
Well,
and sort of
well,
academic progress.
you when you did it the first time, you gave it in kindergarten terms.
well, I think it's how well you're getting along with others,
Yes, yes, go ahead.
right? How do you feel? How are you feeling
Yes,
today,
yes.
right? And what did you just learn? What do you now know how to do that you didn't know how to do yesterday?
I love it because as you said it, and you were saying it ought to continue. It struck me it should be on the teacher evaluation form for
Yeah,
for the school.
yeah,
It ought to be clear that the adults in the school are looking at those same three things of which is really progressing through their career. You know,
exactly.
after 20 years of teaching, what
Yeah,
have you gained in those areas
yeah.
that sharpen your ability to create that place for kids to thrive?
I think that would be have a significant impact.
So, what do you think are some things that are happening in schools that we ought to be celebrating? As you get to go out and be in schools around the city.
Yeah, I think there are, you know, things that children do, that students do regularly that illuminate sort of the possibilities of their lives that we don't celebrate enough. I think certainly here in New York City, as a public school entity, it tends to only get spoken of for those things that are the deficits, or those things that are lagging behind what we want to see, or those incidents that are dramatic in a building. But I think there are teachers who are doing incredible things in classrooms. We have schools that have hydroponic labs with children who are growing food in communities that have slight food deserts, and they're serving their community this food. And these are 10 and 11-year-olds who are growing food and carrying it out into their own community. It's not They're
Mhm.
not from there. They're from there. They're
Yeah,
growing the food. They're bringing it out. I mean, I think that's just like, shouldn't everybody want to know about this? Let's talk about this. There are other ones. Another school by the harbor here in New York. They're building boats. They're actually building boats in the classroom. You see the wood shop, and they're building the boats, and then they go out and they sail them. I mean, those kind of sort of hands-on practical things that you see children do, and that's not, there are the sort of the highlight schools in New York City, the ones that everybody kind of hears about, the Bronx Science or the Stuyvesants or the Brooklyn Tech, and those are great, and those kids do great, wonderful things that also need celebrating. And I could walk into almost any school, and we serve about 70 schools in the city. I could walk into almost any one and find something that I'm just like, why doesn't everybody know that this is what's going on, or that this teacher has created this environment? And you see joy and creativity and kids working together, and it happens. It doesn't happen every day and every moment for every kid, but it happens. And if we lifted those things up, I think more people would want to strive towards them, rather than, I think a lot of people in our system come in with this heaviness of something. Oh, I have to overcome
yeah,
where we are, versus I'm coming into something that I'm going to continue to help lift up, because wow, it's already so great. And I'm not saying I want to have rose-colored glasses, but I am saying I want to bring that positive mentality. Again, that essential question for me around, assessing schools or working with children or working with families is, what do you want to see more of? What do you want to see grow? And let's lean into that. We'll deal with the problems along the way for sure, and we'll have the skills available to do it. But let's start with where we're headed, not with where we've been that we don't, feel necessarily so good about.
I'm hearing the opportunity to thrive, both for the kids in those settings and the adults. Cool.
Completely, completely.
So let me switch it. What you got? One or two things that you think are on the urgency list that we need to be paying more attention to faster?
Yeah, I do think the well-being of teachers is a part of the growing social anxiety that we're seeing in children. I think post-COVID, the social anxiety that came from the isolation and the separation to a degree was a part of it. We're 5 years past, people, almost six, and you're saying like, well, why is this still an issue? Well, I think part of that is that, we didn't really fully recover the adult community around that. Many teachers left. There's new teachers coming in. There's a still, COVID hasn't gone away. It's not in its pandemic proportions, but you still have this idea of people, oh, do I really want to go into a building every day? there's hybrid jobs out there. Like, do I really want to be around children? Aren't they sick a lot of the time? So there's something in that that I don't think we've paid enough attention to. And I think we're going to continue to have anxious children because they're looking to adults who themselves are not as settled as we once were. The things we took for granted are no longer taken for granted. So there's a kind of a hyper alertness. And I think that's trickling down and translating into our children. So I think we have to really work on that piece from the adult side before we can really expect, because we're doing a lot of work with the children. We do a lot of work with teachers as well. But it does feel like when we're working with the children that we're a little bit more downstream than we used to be from where the problem, is continuing to get fomented. And I think and again, I'm not assigning intention or blame anywhere. I just think it's a result of what we all went through.
Needs our
Um,
attention.
yeah, I mean, I used to think, I think there was a reality pre-COVID where, for the most part, the communities that we serve, there are certainly a lot of adverse childhood experiences in those communities. There's certainly a lot of generational trauma that's been present. The adults who would come in, the teachers who would choose to work and support, generally did not have a lot of those same experiences. So there was this sort of, I don't know, kind of foundational pillar that someone could reach toward and hold on to. And there was a gap in that experience of trauma. And I think COVID just erased that gap because we all were in that same boat. And, I don't think I know anybody of any status that didn't have someone that either was lost or came real close to it in during
Yeah.
that terrible time. So I think that needs to be addressed urgently. And I think that we're still rushing to get back to this idea of like, well, we got to get grades back on track. Everybody wonders why there's a chronic absenteeism problem. I think you got to look at what's the attendance rate of teachers, not just what's the absentee rate of students, because there's a correlation there. And so it's kind of like that, put the mask on yourself before the child idea. We've got to
Yeah.
get the adults right. And then the children we'll get those children to come along because they're watching and they're going to do along the lines of what we do.
And there's a parent piece there too then.
Yeah, and all of the adults in the community, right?
Yeah.
We've got to
The
work with
schools,
that
the
piece.
schools, the schools have got to build that in as part, which, we keep dumping more and more on schools, but the reality is if I can't serve the family, it's difficult to serve the child.
Yeah, and I think, here in New York, I think we need to do a much better job of creating welcoming environments for parents in
Yeah.
schools, as well as, important opportunities for parents to come in and be part of conversations that need to be had. So an example is in New York City, we're about to start a school year where a law was passed in New York that would no longer allow a child to bring an internet-enabled device into the school. It's being otherwise referred to as a cell phone ban, which drives me a little crazy because it's sort of highlighting the negative. It's intended to be a policy that would allow children to be less distracted, engage more with each other, be socially more adjusted and all of that, but it's going to go out as this cell phone ban. Certainly, there's lots of questions about how that's going to be implemented and parents who want to be able to touch it. But what's going out, like some notices, some emails, like, why don't we bring everybody into the school
Yep.
who can make it multiple times, not just one little,
Yeah.
I don't mean little, but,
Not an
you know,
announcement. It's
not an
not an announcement.
announcement, and it's not just one afternoon, right? Let's have 4 days in a row from 3 to 5 or from 9 to 12. We're going to have these discussions. We'll bring in someone from the district. They'll talk about it. We'll come up with the pluses and the minuses. We'll show you some examples of how this could work. We'll show you where the child's internet-enabled device will be held while they're in school. Like, we'll do all of these things really methodically. So when it happens, we all understand. I think without that, what we're going to get is parents not understanding. A child's going to report back something that may or may not be the case, and then the parent's going to get upset, and then we're going to have this tug of war going on that I think could be avoided with some effort and some, thoughtfulness ahead of time. And I don't think people are not being thoughtful, but I think the practical realities of a system with 900,000 kids is difficult. So I don't think it's an easy question, but I do think it's an answerable question.
The focus too often is on telling the parents.
Right.
What we need to be doing is asking, listening, and sharing the information. That it's not that the telling part isn't important, but
Right.
we tend to overlook the other piece.
Very much so.
Well, Kevin, I was looking forward to this podcast with you, and I loved it. Thank you so much for what you've shared. Before you sign off, what's the best way that listeners might learn more about counseling in schools or touch base with you?
Yeah, I mean, our website, I think, really gives a lot of opportunities to people interact with us. Counselinginschools.org, all one word, counselinginschools.org. There's a lot of information about what we do, but there's also a section called Partners in Healing, which has a number of exercises and activities that are downloadable that help create sort of, these kind of collaborative social interactions that I was speaking about, or some of these other ideas around social networking that you referred to, Steve, as well. Just little things that both either parents or teachers can do and use. Their PDFs you can download and have. And then there's a little section on there for, ask us a question or send us something. And if we can support in any way, we will. We're moving into, we do a fair amount of training, but we're about to move into sort of a WebEx space where we could work with people anywhere by doing things
Cool.
remotely, and a platform that we're getting ready to launch will do that. So all that stuff will be on the website, and we're there. We're here for all of it.
Well, thank you so much. We'll put your website in the lead-in notes to the podcast so folks can go back and find it. And thank you again.
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I love what you're doing out there. I think it's great.
Thanks for listening, folks. I'd love to hear what you're pondering. You can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn at Steve Barkley, or send me your questions and find my videos and blogs at barkleypd.com.